Hi everyone. If you've already seen the intro to this story on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook, you can skip ahead to 2 minutes and 25 seconds. It's marked as full story on the progress bar. For better pacing, you can also set the playback speed to 1.3x. Also, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any new stories. I won't keep you any longer. Enjoy listening. Cheers. My mom chose her golden child, so I sold the house. My mother called me a thief at my grandmother's funeral reception because I would not hand my brother half of a house he never even visited. Then my brother smiled in front of everyone and said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll make him do the right thing." My name is Evan Miller. I am 32, and for 6 years my life in Los Angeles was not really mine. It belonged to my grandmother Ruth, her oxygen machine, her pill organizer, her grocery lists, her cardiology appointments in Pasadena, and the little blue house in Highland Park where I slept on a broken pull-out couch so she would not be alone at night. My older brother Caleb lived 20 minutes away in West Hollywood and somehow was always too busy, too exhausted, or too between opportunities to help. But at the reception, with a paper plate of untouched food in my hand, everyone looked at me like I had stolen something. Mom stood near the kitchen island, wearing black and shaking just enough for people to think she was grieving instead of performing. She said, "Your grandmother would be ashamed of you, Evan. She believed in family." I kept my voice low. Grandma left the house to me because I took care of her. Caleb put a hand on her shoulder like he was protecting her from me. "You took advantage of a sick woman, man. That's not care." That sentence hit harder than anything else. I had changed her sheets after accidents. I had held her hand when she forgot where she was. I had missed promotions because I could not travel. Caleb had sent birthday flowers twice and asked Grandma for cash 4 times. My Aunt Linda whispered, "Maybe this is not the time." Mom snapped back, "This is exactly the time. He needs to hear what he is doing to this family." People turned their eyes away, but nobody defended me. That was the old pattern. I absorbed the discomfort. Caleb received the sympathy. Mom controlled the story. Then Caleb leaned close enough that only I could hear him. His smile stayed friendly for the room, but his voice went cold. "You are not keeping that house. I already talked to people." I looked at him. "What people?" He patted my shoulder hard enough to hurt. "People who understand pressure." I left before I said something I could not take back. In the driveway, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of a message thread between my mother and Caleb. The first line said, "After the funeral, we push until he breaks." The second line made my hands go numb. The second line said, "If guilt does not work, we make everyone believe Evan manipulated Ruth before she died." I stood beside my car on a quiet street in Highland Park, reading it again while people inside my aunt's house were still eating casserole and pretending my mother had not just accused me of stealing from a dead woman. The unknown number sent one more text. "I thought you should know before they start." Then nothing. I called back immediately, but it went straight to voicemail with no greeting. I stared at the screenshot until the letters blurred. The message thread showed Caleb's name, Mom's name, and dates from the week before Grandma died. They had been planning this while I was helping her sip water through a straw. My mother came outside 10 minutes later. She had wiped her face, but her eyes were dry. "Evan, get back inside. You are embarrassing me." I held up my phone. "What is this?" She did not even look surprised. That was the first thing that scared me. She only glanced at the screen, then at the house, checking whether anyone else could see. "You should not be receiving private conversations." "That is your response?" Her mouth tightened. "My response is that grief makes people say things." "Grief made you plan to ruin my reputation?" She stepped closer and lowered her voice. "You are being dramatic. Caleb is worried about me. I am worried about fairness. Ruth should not have created division." Grandma knew exactly what she was doing. Mom's expression changed, not into sadness, but into irritation. "Your grandmother was lonely. You were always there. You cannot pretend that did not influence her." That was how she did it. She never called me evil at first. She just planted one small rotten seed and waited for me to defend myself until I looked guilty. I felt myself wanting to explain hospital nights, pharmacy runs, and unpaid bills, which was exactly the trap. Caleb came out behind her, keys spinning around one finger. "Everything good out here?" I locked my phone. "Not really." He smiled like we were discussing parking. "Cool. Then here's what happens. We meet with a lawyer next week, you sign over 50%, Mom stops crying, and nobody has to think you preyed on an old lady." I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, "Send me that in writing." For the first time, his smile flickered. Mom grabbed his arm, but he was already glaring at me. Then he said, "You are making a mistake, Evan. People are already asking questions." By Monday morning, people really were asking questions. My cousin Marissa texted, "Did Grandma understand the paperwork?" My uncle sent, "Maybe you should consider mediation before this gets ugly." A woman from Mom's church left a voicemail saying she was praying for my heart to soften, which sounded less like prayer and more like a warning. I was sitting at Grandma's kitchen table when the messages came in. The house still smelled like eucalyptus cough drops, and the lavender detergent she insisted was the only one that did not make her itch. Her cane leaned against the wall by the pantry. Her reading glasses sat beside an unfinished crossword. Everywhere I looked, there was proof she had been a person, not an asset. Caleb arrived without knocking, using the spare key I forgot Mom had. He walked in wearing sunglasses indoors and carrying a measuring tape. I stood up. "Why are you here?" He looked around like he was inspecting a rental. "Relax. I am just getting a sense of the space." "You do not have permission to be here." He laughed quietly. "It is Grandma's house." "It is my house now." The words felt strange, almost disrespectful, but legally true. Grandma had placed the house in her living trust 3 years earlier. Her attorney, Mr. Alvarez, had explained it twice, once to her and once to me, because she wanted no confusion. Caleb had not attended that meeting. Mom had refused, saying legal paperwork made her anxious. Caleb snapped the measuring tape across the dining room. "This wall can come down. Kitchen opens up, add recessed lighting, put it on Airbnb until rates improve." My stomach turned. "You planned this already?" He shrugged. "Someone in this family has to think financially." "You mean someone has to profit from the house?" He ignored. His face hardened. "You always do that. You make helping Grandma your whole personality so nobody can criticize you." That sentence was so practiced it almost sounded corporate. I realized he had said it before, probably to Mom, maybe to anyone who would listen. I walked to the door and opened it. "Leave the key on the table." He moved closer, lowering his voice. "You think a trust protects you from public opinion? I work with investors who eat people like you alive. By the time this is over, you will beg to split it." He dropped the spare key into his pocket instead of on the table. Then my phone buzzed. It was an email from a real estate agent I had never contacted, titled, "Excited to discuss your family's Highland Park property." The agent's email began with, "Hi Evan, Caleb mentioned the family is preparing to reposition the property, and I would love to help you all maximize value." I read it twice while Caleb stood in Grandma's hallway with my spare key still in his pocket, pretending this was normal and harmless. I turned the screen toward him. "You contacted agents about my house." He barely glanced at it. "Our house, eventually." "You are not listening." "No, you are not listening," he said, and the friendly act disappeared. "Mom cannot survive you doing this to her." There it was. The real weapon. Not law, not fairness, not Grandma's wishes. Mom's pain placed in my hands like a loaded gun. It had worked on me since childhood, and Caleb knew the trigger better than anyone. That night I went to Mom's apartment in Glendale because she said she wanted to talk calmly. Caleb was already there, sitting on her couch like a consultant preparing for a meeting. A folder lay on the coffee table. 2 mugs of tea sat untouched, staged like proof that this was supposed to be gentle. Mom did not hug me. She nodded toward the chair across from them. "Sit down, Evan. We need to be adults." I stayed standing. "I came to hear you, not to be ambushed." Caleb opened the folder. "This is a quitclaim deed template. It does not need to be dramatic." Mom pressed a tissue to her nose. "Your brother is trying to protect me from stress." I said, "He is trying to get property." Her face collapsed into wounded disbelief. "How can you say that about your own brother?" "Because he measured Grandma's dining room before her obituary was even published." Caleb leaned back. "You are twisting things." Mom whispered, "You always keep score." That stopped me? I had heard it my whole life. When I was 13 and Caleb crashed Mom's car, I was keeping score because I mentioned he had been drinking. When he borrowed $2,000 and never repaid it, I was keeping score because I asked for it back. When I skipped a friend's wedding to take Grandma to urgent care, I was keeping score because I looked tired. I picked up the folder and saw sticky notes marking where I was supposed to sign. My hands went cold again. "You prepared this before asking me." Mom looked away. Caleb did not. Then I noticed something written in the margin in Caleb's handwriting. "Use grief angle first. If he refuses, bring up capacity." I placed the folder back on the coffee table and asked, "What does bring up capacity mean?" Caleb reached for it too quickly, but I had already seen enough. Mom's face went pale. "That is not what you think. It says you plan to question whether Grandma was mentally capable of leaving me the house." Caleb exhaled like I was wasting his time. "It is a legitimate concern. You saw her twice last year. I do not need to be her caregiver to notice influence." The word influence hit me like an accusation dressed in legal clothes. I looked at Mom. "You were at the trust signing. You refused to come inside, but you drove her there. You knew she wanted this." Mom folded her tissue into smaller and smaller squares. "Ruth was stubborn. She was lucid." "She was lonely," Mom said, sharper now. "And you made yourself necessary." For a second the room tilted. I remembered Grandma apologizing because she needed help showering. I remembered pretending my back did not hurt when I lifted her from the recliner. I remembered Mom saying she could not handle hospitals because they gave her migraines while I learned every nurse's name. I remembered Caleb telling me, "You are better at this stuff," as if compassion were a chore he could delegate. I said I did not make myself necessary. Everyone else disappeared. Caleb stood up. "Do not talk to Mom like that." I laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because I finally heard the setup. Mom was fragile, Caleb was protective, and I was cruel if I objected. They had assigned everyone a role, and mine was to carry guilt until it became obedience. Mom began crying then, loudly enough that the neighbor upstairs could probably hear. I lost my mother, and now I am losing my son. I wanted to comfort her. That was the worst part. Even after everything, my body still moved toward her pain. Then Caleb said softly, "Just sign the deed, Evan. You can fix this tonight." He said it like forgiveness was a document, and love was something I could purchase by surrendering. I looked at him, then at the folder, then at Mom's tears that somehow stopped whenever she checked my reaction. "No," I said carefully. "I'm taking this with me." Caleb stepped in front of the door. "That folder stays here." For the first time in my life, I did not step back. I lifted my phone with a hand that would not stop shaking and said, "Move, or I call the police." Then Caleb moved, but only after smiling like I had proved his point. "See, Mom? This is who he is now." I walked out with the folder under my arm, shaking so hard I dropped my keys twice before I got into the car. By the next afternoon, the conflict had escaped the family. Mom posted on Facebook, not naming me, but naming me perfectly. It is heartbreaking when inheritance turns a child against his family. Please pray for wisdom, humility, and healing. Within an hour, relatives, church friends, and people I had not seen since high school were commenting with broken heart emojis and little speeches about greed. Then Caleb posted a photo of Grandma from 3 years earlier, sitting between us at Thanksgiving. His caption said, "She loved all of us equally. Some people forget that when paperwork gets involved." I stared at the picture because I remembered that day. Caleb had arrived late, asked Grandma if she still had that old coin collection, and left before dessert. I had driven her to the pharmacy afterward because her ankles were swollen. By lunch, my phone became a courtroom. "You should be ashamed. Your mother needs you. Money changes people." My Aunt Linda wrote privately, "I do not know the whole story, but maybe give your mom peace." Peace. Everyone wanted peace from the person being robbed because peace was easier than truth. That evening, my manager at the architecture firm pulled me aside after a client call. "Evan, this is awkward, but someone called reception asking whether you had been under unusual stress at work." My mouth went dry. "Who called?" "She said she was your mother." I felt the room narrow. "What did she say exactly?" My manager hesitated. "That you were making impulsive decisions after a death, and she was worried you might need support." It sounded caring. It was poison. If they could make me look unstable at work, they could make every decision I made look unstable everywhere else. I went to Grandma's house that night to change the locks. On the porch, someone had left a sympathy card tucked under the mat. Inside, in Caleb's handwriting, it said, "Last chance to handle this privately." I looked up and saw a white SUV idling across the street. When I stepped toward it, the headlights flicked off. Then my phone rang. It was Mr. Alvarez, Grandma's attorney, and his first words were, "Evan, your brother came to my office today." Mr. Alvarez sounded older than usual, and that scared me more than Caleb's threats. "He did not get past reception," he said, "but he claimed he represented the family and needed copies of Ruth's trust documents." I sat on Grandma's porch with the new lock set beside me. "Did you give him anything?" "Absolutely not. But Evan, he was not alone. He brought a man who introduced himself as a real estate investment consultant. Caleb had found a way to make grief look like a business meeting." The next Sunday, Mom turned the church coffee hour into a public trial. I did not go, but my Aunt Linda called me afterward, whispering from her car, "Your mother said you isolated Ruth from everyone." I gripped the phone. "You know that is not true." "I know you were there most," she said, which was not the same thing. "But people are saying Ruth changed after you moved in." I moved in because she fell in the bathroom and nobody answered their phone. Linda went quiet. I forgot about that. They all forgot because forgetting helps them. That night, Caleb uploaded a video to Instagram stories from outside Grandma's house. He did not show the address, but anyone in the family knew it. He stood on the sidewalk, voice heavy with fake sadness. Some doors get locked not because of safety, but because someone wants to erase the rest of us. I watched it 3 times, each time feeling my chest tighten. He was not trying to win legally yet. He was trying to make me socially homeless before he took the actual house. Every comment became another little eviction notice from people who had never carried a grocery bag up Grandma's steps. Then I saw the comments. "Stay strong, bro. Your grandma would want unity." Some people show their true colors when money comes. One comment came from a woman named Paige Harmon. Her profile said she worked at the same real estate investment firm as Caleb. "Families deserve equitable outcomes, Honor," she wrote. Equitable? Not fair, not legal, not truthful. Corporate language pasted over theft. I screenshotted everything, even though my thumb shook, because some part of me understood that memory would not be enough. At 11:47 p.m., someone tried the new front lock. The handle moved once, then again, slowly. I was inside, standing in the dark kitchen holding my breath. Through the door, Caleb whispered, "Evan, open up. We need to talk before this gets worse." Behind him, my mother said, "Tell him we know about the appraisal." I had not told anyone about the appraisal. I had only scheduled it that morning through a certified appraiser Mr. Alvarez recommended because I needed to understand what Grandma's house was worth before Caleb and Mom kept throwing numbers at me like weapons. So when Mom whispered, "Tell him we know about the appraisal," I did not open the door. I stood in the kitchen, barefoot on cold tile, and realized someone had access to information they should not have. Caleb knocked softly. "We can hear you moving around," I said through the door. "Leave now." Mom's voice trembled in that practiced way. "Evan, please do not make us stand outside like strangers." "You became strangers when you tried my lock." Caleb laughed under his breath. "That is a dramatic interpretation." I called 911 but told the dispatcher I did not need sirens unless they refused to leave. The mention of police changed their tone immediately. Mom hissed something at Caleb and 30 seconds later their car pulled away. The next morning I checked everything. Email, calendar, bank alerts, old family shared accounts. Then I remembered Grandma's iPad. Years earlier, I had set up a shared family calendar so Mom could see medical appointments. I opened it and found Caleb still had access through an old Gmail account we used for Grandma's care schedule. The appraisal appointment was there because I had accidentally added it to the wrong calendar. But that was not all. Caleb had added his own events too. Contractor walkthrough. Investor lunch. Mom call. Pressure plan. The arrogance was almost unbelievable. Or maybe it was not arrogance. Maybe he had been so used to everyone accommodating him that he forgot secrecy required effort. One entry made me stop breathing. Page draft letter re elder influence. I clicked it, but there were no details. I called Mr. Alvarez. "Can someone accuse me of influencing Grandma if she had a trust?" "They can accuse anything," he said. "Proving it is different. But accusations can still cost money, time, and peace." Peace again. That word followed me everywhere like a bill someone else created and handed to me. That afternoon, I searched Paige Harmon. She was not just Caleb's co-worker. She specialized in acquiring distressed family properties for private investors. Then an email arrived from her work address, addressed to me and my mother with the subject line, "Proposed family resolution before legal escalation." Paige's email read like a polite mugging. She said everyone understood this was an emotional time, that disputes could damage family legacies, and that a cooperative transfer of partial ownership might prevent unnecessary allegations regarding undue influence. She attached a proposed timeline. First, I would sign over half the house to Caleb. Second, Paige's firm would evaluate renovation options. Third, the property could be refinanced or sold within 12 months. I called Caleb. He answered on the second ring, too calm. "I wondered when you would stop ignoring reality." "Why is your coworker emailing me legal threats?" "She is not threatening you. She is helping structure a solution." "She buys distressed properties, Caleb." "Exactly. She understands complicated family assets." The word assets made me look around Grandma's kitchen, at the chipped yellow mug she used every morning, at the magnet from Santa Monica Pier where she took us as kids, at the wall where she marked our heights in pencil. Caleb was not fighting for memories. He was packaging them. I said, "You are trying to turn Grandma's house into a deal." He paused. "You really think you are morally better because you changed diapers?" I closed my eyes. There it was again. The thing nobody wanted to name. Care work disgusted him when it did not benefit him, then became sacred when property appeared. "Do not contact me, except through attorneys," I said. He laughed. "You cannot afford a long fight." That was true enough to hurt. The house was valuable, but my checking account was not. Grandma's care had drained my savings slowly, one prescription, one repair, one unpaid day off at a time. That evening I spread everything across the dining table, screenshots, the folder, Facebook post, Paige's email, the calendar entries. Patterns began forming. Mom created emotional pressure, Caleb created public pressure, Paige created financial pressure. Each one looked separate until I placed them side by side. Then I noticed another calendar entry from 2 months before Grandma died. "Ruth signing?" Ask Mom again. I stared at it, confused. Grandma's trust was signed 3 years earlier. What signing had Caleb been expecting? I dug through old voicemails until I found one from Grandma, saved by accident. Her voice was weak but clear. "Evan, honey, if your brother calls asking about papers, do not argue. Just come home." I played Grandma's voicemail 5 times. Each time her voice sounded smaller, but the warning became louder. Caleb had been asking about papers before she died. Mom knew something, and Grandma had been scared enough to call me, but careful enough not to say too much. The next morning I went through the metal file cabinet in her bedroom. It felt invasive, like opening drawers inside her private thoughts. There were medical bills, old tax returns, warranty papers for appliances that no longer worked, and birthday cards tied with rubber bands. In the bottom drawer, behind a folder labeled Utilities, I found an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a handwritten letter dated 6 months before her death. Evan, if you are reading this, I am sorry they made my love into a fight. I did not leave you the house because I loved them less. I left it to you because you gave up years of your life and never asked me what you would get. Your mother will say I was confused. I was not confused. Caleb will say he was excluded. He excluded himself. I sat on the floor and cried so hard I could barely breathe. It was the first time since the funeral that grief felt clean, not mixed with defense, not interrupted by someone else's accusation. The letter continued. Caleb asked me to sign a paper giving him authority to manage the house if I became too sick. He said it would reduce stress for everyone. I refused. Your mother cried and said I was humiliating him. I told her humiliation is not the same as consequence. There it was. The signing. Caleb had tried to get control before she died, and Mom had not been a grieving bystander. She had been in the room, helping him call pressure love. At the bottom, Grandma wrote, Mr. Alvarez has a copy of this letter. Keep yours safe. I called him immediately. He was quiet after I read the first lines. Ruth insisted on that. She was very clear. Why did you not tell me? Because she asked me to wait unless they challenged you. Evan, I believe that moment has arrived. An hour later, he sent me a scanned copy from his records and a note confirming Grandma had delivered it herself, fully lucid, with a notary present for related documents. For the first time, I felt the ground shift under Caleb. Then Aunt Linda called, crying, Evan, your mother just told everyone you forced Ruth to write something before she died. She says there is a letter and she says you fabricated it. By evening, Mom's version had become the official family tragedy. She told relatives I had produced a mysterious letter and that grief had pushed me into rewriting history. Caleb posted again, this time with a black and white photo of Grandma holding my hand. The caption said, Isolation is not love. That one broke something in me. He used the photo I took at Cedars-Sinai the night Grandma was hospitalized with pneumonia. I had sent it to Mom because she said she was too nauseous to visit but wanted to feel included. Caleb had cropped out the hospital bracelet and turned my care into evidence against me. Strangers did not know that. Family did, and most of them stayed silent anyway. I drove to Mom's apartment because I needed to hear her say it to my face. Caleb opened the door before I knocked twice. He looked satisfied. Bad idea coming here angry. I am here to speak to Mom. Mom appeared behind him in a robe, looking fragile for an audience that was not there. Evan, I cannot handle your aggression. My aggression is asking why you called Grandma's letter fake. She lifted her chin. Because I know my mother. She would never write something so cruel about Caleb. She wrote the truth. Caleb stepped forward. Careful. I looked at Mom. Did you know he asked her to sign over control before she died? Her eyes moved to Caleb, then away. That tiny movement answered me before her mouth did. She was confused, Mom said. No, she refused. Mom's voice sharpened. You are enjoying this. You always wanted to be the martyr who proved we needed you. That was the humiliation. Not that she lied, but that she knew exactly where to cut. She knew I had spent years terrified I was resentful. Terrified care had made me bitter. Terrified love and obligation had tangled until I could not separate them. Caleb smiled without warmth. This is why a judge needs to look at everything. A judge can look, I said. So can everyone else. His smile faded and the room changed so quickly that even Mom stopped pretending to cry. Mom whispered, What does that mean? It means I am done protecting your image. For the first time, Mom looked truly afraid. Not sad, not offended, afraid. Then Caleb said, If you release private family matters, I will make sure your employer sees what kind of unstable person you are. My phone buzzed. It was my manager. Evan, HR received an anonymous concern about you. I sat in my car outside Mom's building for almost 20 minutes, reading my manager's message while my hands went numb on the steering wheel. HR had received an anonymous concern about my emotional stability, my judgment, and my recent conflict involving an elderly relative. The wording was too polished to be Mom. It sounded like Paige. For the first time, I felt genuinely cornered. Not morally, not emotionally, but practically. If my job became part of this, I could lose the income I needed to fight. If Caleb dragged me into a legal contest, the house might become a cage instead of freedom. If Mom kept crying publicly, half the family would keep supplying her with sympathy like fuel. I drove back to Grandma's house and sat in the dark living room. The oxygen machine was gone, but I still heard its rhythm in my memory, steady and accusing. I imagined Grandma seeing me like this, surrounded by papers, trying to prove I had loved her without an invoice. At midnight, I called my friend Maya. She had watched all of this from a distance because I was too embarrassed to tell the full story. When I finished, she said, Evan, they are not trying to win an argument. They are trying to exhaust you until surrender feels like rest. That sentence landed harder than any legal advice. I do not know if I can keep fighting, I admitted. You do not have to fight their way. The next morning, I met Mr. Alvarez at his office downtown. He listened while I explained HR, Page, the post, the letter, the spare key, everything. Then he folded his hands and said, "You have a legal right to keep the property, but you also have a legal right to sell it." I stared at him. Sell Grandma's house? If remaining attached to it gives them leverage, selling may remove the battlefield. The idea felt like betrayal for about 10 seconds. Then I looked at the photos on my phone. Caleb measuring walls, Mom crying over fairness, Paige's email turning grief into a transaction. They had already stopped treating it like Grandma's home. They treated it like a pressure point. That afternoon, I walked room to room and whispered apologies to memories, not people. Then I called an independent realtor, not Paige, not anyone connected to Caleb. At 6:03 p.m., she said, "If you want discretion, we can do an off-market listing." I said, that is exactly what I want. And from the hallway, I heard the back door click. I froze in the hallway, phone still pressed to my ear. The back door should not have opened. I had changed the front lock, but the old sliding door by the laundry room had a latch Grandma always meant to fix and never did. I stepped into the kitchen and saw Caleb halfway inside, one hand raised like I had caught him doing something harmless. He smiled. "Before you overreact, Mom gave me permission. This is not Mom's house. It was her mother's house. That sentence does not give you a key." He looked past me at the papers on the table, then at the realtor's name glowing on my phone screen. His face changed. "You are selling it." I ended the call without speaking. "Leave now." He walked in anyway. "You selfish piece of work." The words did not shock me. The panic behind them did. For the first time, Caleb looked less like a golden child and more like a man watching money escape. "Why do you care if you only wanted fairness?" I asked. He pointed at me. "Because you do not get to erase us." "You erased yourself." His voice dropped. "Paige has investors ready. Do you understand what you are ruining?" There it was, spoken plainly. Not Grandma, not Mom, investors. I kept my phone low and hit record. California law was complicated, and I knew I could not use everything freely, but I wanted a record of what happened in my own house during a break-in. Caleb kept going. "I promised numbers. I told them this would be handled after the funeral. You were supposed to fold. You promised a house you did not own." He moved closer. "You think that letter saves you? Mom will swear Ruth was confused. I will swear you controlled access. Paige knows how to make this look ugly." I felt fear, but it no longer ran the room. "Thank you for explaining the plan." He saw the phone then. His face went white. For once, he understood too late that confidence was not the same as control. The police arrived 12 minutes later because I called while he was still yelling. I did not press for anything dramatic. I filed a report for trespassing, changed the back door, and sent the incident number to Mr. Alvarez. The next day, I met the realtor quietly. We priced the house fairly, not greedily. She said off-market buyers in Los Angeles moved fast when the title was clean. That night, I received an email from Paige to Caleb by mistake. It said, "If Evan sells independently, our margin disappears." Paige recalled the email 3 minutes later, but I already had the screenshot. "If Evan sells independently, our margin disappears." 7 words stripped the halo off every speech about family, fairness, and Grandma's legacy. Mr. Alvarez drafted a letter that was calm enough to be terrifying. It instructed Mom, Caleb, and Paige to stop contacting my employer, stop making claims they could not support, stop entering the property, and direct all communication through counsel. Attached were Grandma's notarized letter, the calendar entries, Paige's email, Caleb's accidental confession summarized from the trespass report, and screenshots of the public posts implying elder abuse. I expected them to explode. Instead, they went quiet for 48 hours. That silence was worse than yelling. Then Aunt Linda called. "Your mother says you are threatening everyone with lawyers. I am stopping them from lying. She says Caleb only wanted to keep the house and the family." I sent Linda one screenshot. "If Evan sells independently, our margin disappears." She did not reply for an hour. When she finally did, her message was short but not one word. "I am so sorry, Evan." That was the first crack in Mom's audience. The sale moved quickly. A couple from Silver Lake wanted the house for their daughter and aging father. They liked the lemon tree, the built-in shelves, the uneven porch Grandma refused to replace because my grandfather had built it. They were not investors. They were not Paige. They offered slightly under asking, all cash, with a respectful closing timeline. I accepted. 3 days before closing, Mom appeared on the porch alone. No Caleb, no tears at first, just a small woman holding a manila envelope. "I brought photos," she said. "Your grandmother would not want strangers here." I opened the door but did not invite her in. Grandma wanted me to be safe. Mom's eyes filled. "I made mistakes. I wanted that to be enough. I hated that I wanted it." Then she pushed the envelope toward me. Inside was a handwritten statement saying I would give Caleb 30% of the proceeds after closing as a gesture of healing. I looked at her. This is why you came. Her tears stopped too quickly. She whispered, if you do not sign, Caleb is going to release things about you. What things? Her face tightened. Then my phone buzzed with a video from Caleb titled, The Truth About My Brother and Our Grandmother. I did not open Caleb's video first. That was the old Evans mistake, running toward every accusation like I could catch it before it hit the ground. Instead, I forwarded it to Mr. Alvarez, my realtor, and Maya. Then I sat on Grandma's porch, the manila envelope beside me, while Mom waited for me to panic. I am not signing this, I said. Mom's voice shook, but anger sat underneath it. You are choosing money over your family. No, I am choosing peace over people who use family as a weapon. She looked past me into the house. Caleb is struggling. So did I. He needed a chance. I needed a mother. That finally landed. Her mouth opened, but no performance came out. Caleb posted the video an hour later. It was 6 minutes of edited grief, hospital photos, captions about isolation, his voice saying he had been pushed away from his grandmother by someone controlling access. But by then, Linda had seen Paige's email. Mr. Alvarez had sent the cease and desist. My manager had already been briefed with documentation. And when Caleb's video started spreading through the family, Linda commented publicly, "This is not the full truth, and you know it." Then 2 cousins asked why a real estate investor had been involved. Someone else asked why Caleb had promised margins. Paige deleted her comment history by dinner. The closing happened on a Thursday morning in an office in Pasadena. I signed my name, not with triumph, but with steady hands. The money arrived later that day. I paid remaining medical bills, set aside taxes, donated Grandma's lift chair to a caregiver group, and bought a small condo in Long Beach where nobody had a key, a claim, or a memory they could twist into leverage. Mom did not speak to me for 3 months. Caleb sent one email through a lawyer, then disappeared when Mr. Alvarez responded with evidence. Paige's firm quietly removed her from acquisitions for a while, according to someone who knew someone, which is how Los Angeles tells the truth without admitting it. I kept Grandma's letter framed inside my closet, not in the living room. I did not need visitors to see it. I needed me to see it on days when guilt tried to sound like love. The last message Mom sent said, "I hope you are happy with what you destroyed." I typed 3 different replies and deleted them all. Finally, I wrote, "I did not destroy the family. I stopped being the foundation you were cracking." Then I blocked Caleb, muted Mom, and slept through the night for the first time in years. And that's the end of this story. Whose side are you on? Share your opinion in the comments, leave a like, and subscribe with the notification bell on if you want more stories like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.